afofo Mawa tulungene nwa
More music on trendybeats.com.
Afam bụ Chukwudi Utazi. Achọrọ m ịnabata mmadụ ncha na nkata ụmụ ibe. Nkata ụmụ ibe nke ọnwa Mee nke ọnwa ise n'afọ 2025. Biko ndị nọ n'azụ, unu bịa kete nso, biko oche ka fọdụ n'iru. Biko, if you're sitting behind, please fill up the spaces in front first, so that sitting behind will be the punishment for our latecomers. Okay? You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. Make yourselves comfortable. Thank you. All right. So once again, you're welcome to the May 2025 edition of our monthly Distinguished Speaker Series, Nkata Umuibe. And of course, we have a power-packed conversation coming up very, very soon. Our speaker is already seated here. Our moderator is already here. And our beautiful audience, you guys are already here. So we'll start off immediately. Apologies once again for starting a little behind schedule. But we are here now, so we'll kick off. All right, so I'll call on the director of the Center for Memories, Mazi Hanyi Boko, to come up and welcome us formally and also tell us a bit more about Nkata, what Nkata is about, and what we are to expect this evening. Put your hands together for him, please. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Now from the Center for Memories, Kaiji Anabata Madonine, to the May 2025 edition of Nkata Umuibe. Kunusimara, Nkata Umuibe is one of the many programs in the Center for Memories, since 2017 that the Center for Memories was established. There are a number of things that the Center has decided to do to realize its mission of documenting, preserving, and promoting the history, culture, and identity of Ndị Igbo, ihe ji mara Ndị Igbo. And nkata anyị na-akpata ata bụ one of the many profound ways of to talk about the issues that matter to Ndị Igbo. So every month, anyị na-anya ihe na-eme na mba ụwa, ihe na-eme na obodo Nigeria, ihe na-eme na ala Igbo, and we begin to look at the issues and the trends and how it concerns us. And we begin to look at people who are experts or who have done something, within those areas, to lead or shape a narrative that will help Ndị Igbo to move forward. Maka na ihe niile na-eme na center is geared towards maka ụnya, tata na gịnị, echi. So we wouldn't just depend on the past. We're also looking at the future. How do we get a desirable future for Ndị Igbo? Mgbe anyị meetiri Prof, and Prof has been like a huge support to the center. In one way or the other, she has, been helping us to realize this mission. And when we went to see her and share the idea of her leading the keynote, Prof made it easier for us, and she keyed in, and she was so willing to do this and to contribute to the Igbo conversation. And so, Prof, we thank you so much for agreeing to do this and coming fully prepared, to give us, to shape the narrative, One of the persons who called me earlier asked me, why did we select the topic? It's simply because in as much as the topic is an often repeated saying or adage, whatever you want to call it, people use it most of the time, and oftentimes it feels as if but again, there may be seeming truth or maybe no truth about it, but nobody has challenged it. And Prof has decided to take the initiative to challenge it. And what we expect tonight is to see credible evidence, empirical evidence, to disabuse our minds and make us realize that or maybe I don't know the direction Prof will take, but I encourage everybody to, to relax, enjoy whatever Prof is going to teach us, and be ready to ask questions and contribute your own opinion. I don't know if I said everything you want me to say, Chukwudi, but the reformer will come and supplement. Dalono Rinde, none.
We are clapping like people that are forced to clap. All right, that's more like it. I understand that the weather is taking its toll on us today. It's been a kind of gloomy day. All right, so just like the director has said, we're expecting a very beautiful conversation this evening. And the month of May is very special to Ndebo, especially in the sense that this was the month that the civil war came to an end. Okay, the Nigeria-Biafra war. Sorry, came to, it started actually. Yes, thank you so much, Mr. James, for nodding your head and correcting me. Yes, so the Nigeria-Biafra war started in May 1967, and all right, so yes, Biafra declared independence in 1967 May, and the month of May is very, very special to us, okay? And that's why every May we try to tie our topic, our Nkata topic, to something around the war and Biafra itself, okay? And this evening we will definitely have a lot more insights. So keep an open mind and sit back and relax. And I do not find myself worthy to introduce the speaker, our distinguished speaker for the month. So I would call on someone who I find more worthy to do that, right?
So I'm going to be introducing our distinguished speaker for our May 2025 edition of Nkata Umuibe. For those of you who are not familiar with her work, this professor that we have in our midst today is one of the highest achievers in the world of literature, and yet she's also like the most unassuming person you can ever meet in life, right? So like Chukwudi said, I'm not even qualified to introduce her. So I'll just read what we have here and then invite her to give her presentation. So Professor Akachi Adimora Ezigbo is an award-winning Nigerian writer, scholar, and professor who has taught at universities in Nigeria, South Africa, and the UK. A former head of English at the University of Lagos, she has received numerous fellowships and awards, including the Nigerian Prize for Literature in 2007 and the Fonlon Nichols Award in 2022. Professor Ezigbo has published over 50 works across all literary genres, including the notable trilogy, The Last of the Strong Ones, House of Symbols, and Children of the Eagle. She is a fellow of several academic and literary bodies and has held leadership roles in PEN Nigeria, writer, and she's currently the chairman of the NLNG Prize for Literature. And she's also on various academic boards and institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, with the most resounding round of applause that you can summon, please let's make welcome Professor Akachi Adimora Ezigbo.
Obi jupụtara m aṅụrị ịnọ n'etiti unu taa. Ana m ekele the Center for Memories for inviting me and asking me to give this lecture today. I'm overjoyed to see so many young people, especially students, in our midst. As you heard, the title of my presentation is Nwoke Nocha Ogu, Nwaanyị Nwere Akụkọ, a critique of war, memory, and power in the reimagination of Igbo historical narratives. So I have a paper prepared. I'll be talking to my paper, reading part of it, and then talking to it. And I'm hoping that at the end, we'll be able to have a very lively conversation around this topic. Between July 1967 and January 1970, a fratricidal conflict, the Nigeria-Biafra War, raged for 30 good months, consuming millions of lives, destroying property, impoverishing millions of people, and inflicting psychological damage to many more, especially Ndi Igbo, who were direct victims of the conflict. The effects of the war are still evident in the level of trauma, resentment, disenchantment, and anger exhibited by not only the direct victims, but also subsequent generations of Ndi Igbo. Like most wars, the Biafran War, as we also call it, has generated a lot of literary activities inside and outside Nigeria. A large body of literature exists today based on the events of the war and the aftermath. However, women's voices, experiences, and contributions seem to have been marginalized in the recreation of the events of the war. Ndi Igbo say that Nwoke Nocha Ogu, Nwaanyị Nwere Akụkọ, which literally translated means after men have fought the battle, women will tell the story. In other words, men do the difficult and risky task, while women take the easy ones and enjoy the glory of the victory. But history and experience have shown that not only do women engage in difficult tasks in war situations, but they also participate in physical combat and other activities that are important in the fighting and execution of a war. This was very much so in the Nigeria-Biafra War. In my paper, in my presentation today, women's counter-narratives on the war are given particular attention, even though the men's narrative receives some mention. I examined the various perspectives that have emerged from the Nigerian writer's imaginative recreation of the events of the Nigerian crisis and civil war, the Biafran War. I argue that a writer's recreation of a situation of conflict, such as war, is often influenced by the subjective interpretation of the situation by the writer concerned. Now, I'm going to use Okwudeba Nole's theory of perception and Sigmund Freud's theory of selective perception to analyze this, my topic. Some of you may not understand what I mean by theory, but theories are yardstick we use to talk about issues. But I'm not going to go into details about these theories, but I just want you to understand that selective perception or perception simply means perceptions have practical significance for the individual. That is, the way you perceive an idea or a story will determine the way you react to it, the way you see it. Opinions vary according to individual differences in perceptions and preconceptions of reality. Perceptions are usually formed by taking in only those elements of experience that are relevant to one's ongoing processes and interests. It's the same thing with Freud. Freud also argues that the way you perceive something is going to determine the way you view it. For instance, look at this expression or proverb by our people. Nwoke nụcha ọgụ, nwaanyị nwere akụkọ. Does it mean that women do not participate in difficult tasks? It's because in our culture, sometimes women seem to be given a secondary role or position. So sometimes their roles, either in the family or in the community, are not usually highlighted as male roles are highlighted. My argument is that Nigerian writers have different perceptions of the Biafra War and its effect on men and women. Most male writers perceive it as a struggle between men in which women played minor roles. Many male authors do not highlight women's strengths and positive contributions to the war effort. And even when they focus on women at all, they dwell on their weaknesses, including their roles as prostitutes during the war, adulterers, as in Opewu's The Last Duty, gold diggers who go after money, rivals for male attention and financial support. And these perceptions guide the actions the individuals are prepared to take. Nigerian writers, especially those from the southeast, that is from Igbo land, have published books, novels, poems, short stories, and plays based on the Biafran War and the aftermath. The recreation of war in books, which started even before the war ended, has continued. Even last year, another book came out on the war. This tells you the kind of impact the Nigerian Civil War, the Biafran War, has had on our people, not only in Igbo land, but even in Nigeria. So many people are still thinking about that war because the effects are still being seen around us. Many people are still writing about it. For instance, Obioma Nnemeka, what's his name? Obioma Chigozie Obioma, one of our younger writers who is doing very well, published a book last year based on the Civil War. And the title of the book is The Road to the Country. I'm sure some of you may have heard about it. Now, the recreation of the war started, like I said, even before the war ended. Some writers have started documenting their experiences about the war, writers like Chukwuemeka Ike. And after the war, they published the books. And some of the writers who have written about the war, the male writers, include Cyprian Ekwensi, who wrote Survive the Peace, Chinua Achebe, who wrote Girls at War and other stories, and There Was a Country, A Personal History of Biafra. Wole Soyinka wrote Madmen and Specialists. Chukwuemeka Ike wrote Sunset at Dawn. Among the women, we have Flora Nwapa, who wrote Never Again, Buche Mecheta, Destination Biafra, John Munonye, A Read for the Maidens, Isidore Opewu, The Last Duty, Elechi Amadi, Sunset at Dawn. Edi Iro wrote a trilogy, Toads of War, and 48 Guns for the General, and The Siren in the Night. 3 novels came out based on the war by Edi Iro. And then there's Chimamanda Adichie's Half of a Yellow Sun. Some of you may have read it. And I have also a novel on the war. The title is Roses and Bullets for the Nigerian edition. The UK edition is A Million Bullets and a Rose. And so on and so forth. People have been writing about the war. Most of these writers perceive the war as unjust and destructive. They look at it from the human angle. Some of them explore the battlefield, actions in the battlefield, and there were so many variations in the use of themes by these writers. Literary creativity is an avenue through which writers have always exorcised the demon or trauma of war. Thus, writing about the Civil War has had a therapeutic effect on them. It is important to note, however, that most of the writers have recreated the experience of the Biafran War in art, and they have tended to recreate the event from a male perspective. That is the angle we are discussing today. They looked at it from a male perspective. Out of over 50 writers that have written the story of the war narrative, only, in fact, less than 12 are women. Most of the other writers are men. And they have written from the perspective of men. And that is why it seems that the women have been silenced over the years. A lot of them did not focus on women. And this is a problem, because what we are arguing about here in this lecture is inclusion. Inclusion is very important in human affairs. If you empower some people and you disempower others, it's a problem. If you promote some people and marginalize others, is a problem. And I argue that women have been marginalized, not only about the war narratives, but even about other issues in our country. And even in Igbo land. Because I say this with a measure of responsibility, that women are often not given their due in Igbo society. Some people have said that Igbo society is democratic more than any other ethnic group in Nigeria. We didn't have kings or queens or that kind of thing in the past, even though today we have Igwes and the rest of them. But before Igbo people, and I say, Ndi Igbo amweze, Igbo amweze. Our people, communities were ruled by heads of families and heads of communities. There were no kings among them. They came together, discussed issues, and took decisions. Everybody is heard. But ask yourself, how many times were women's voices heard? Even though women had societies like Omoada or Alotaradi Association, but what kind of power did they have, you might ask? Now, one of the points I also made, which I mentioned earlier, is that if you look at the male-authored books, many of the characters, they are sometimes, let me give an example, Eddie Rose Toast for War, or Cyprian Ekwensi Survive the Peace. The women in those novels are prostitutes. They sleep around, go from one army camp to another, seducing men, sleeping with them, distracting them. But if you were, many of you were not born during that war. I was in my late teens when the war was fought, and I knew that women played many important roles in that war. They were not all just prostitutes. They manned the homes when the men were at the battlefield. And some of them were even combatants. I know I don't have much time, so I'm trying to skip some issues here. Now, thus, no male authors have focused extensively in narrating the war stories, whether fiction or fact, from women's perspective. It is understandable, though, that they have seen things from the perspective of their gender, and consequently interpreted the events of the war and the post-war period from their subjective angle. One can say, to some extent, you see, is what you know, you tell. Is what you know, you narrate. So one should not really blame men altogether, for not focusing on women. This is why the women's voice is very important. Women should claim their voice, reclaim their voice. And when women writers began to write, writers like Buchie Mecheta, Flora Wapa, Chimamanda Adichie, Akachi Ezeibo, and so many others, they now looked at the war from the women's perspective. And if you read their works, you see that there are women characters who performed major roles in the war. They were not prostitutes. Some of them were mothers. Some of them were helped in the community in one way or another. So that is the point we are making. That women's voice, the inclusion of women's voice, giving them agency in narratives, whether factual or fictional, is very important. So it is this anomaly that this timely lecture wants to address and correct by focusing on women and war. It is necessary to fill the gaps and resurrect the hidden truths and reveal the untold stories of women's experience during the war. True, a few women writers have recreated the experience of women in the war, but there is need to go beyond the exploration of women's contribution to the domestic front, ensuring the survival of families and communities and trading. It is necessary to explore the totality of women's war efforts and participation, even in the area of military action. No male writer portrayed women as soldiers or combatants, except now, I haven't read the book. I understand that Chigozie Obioma actually has a major female character in his novel published last year, and that the woman is a soldier. But we know that such women existed in the Biafran army. I can attest to this because a woman from my town, her name is Adeline Okpala. She fought as a soldier during the war. In fact, she was one of the commanders. She commanded a platoon that fought around one of the hottest sectors of the war, around Mpo. Some of you who have read about the war would have heard that Mpo area was hot. This woman was a commander, leading men to battle. But who has said anything about her? Either in factual account or fictional account. In fact, I deliberately went a few years ago to interview her. I didn't see her. She's married. She has children now. And I think her husband lives in Lagos. I met her sister, Chief Vicky Opal. And Vicky told me, she told me that she is writing a book about her sister and her war experience, which is very good. If such a book comes out, it will be properly distributed so that our youths will know that women also fought in that war. So it's not a matter of women also fought in that war. And I may also say it here that it wasn't just carrying guns. Some of us, I was trained as a special constable during the war. We were all in school when the war broke out and then schools were closed. I was trained as a special constable. The work we did was to man checkpoints, check for infiltrators, saboteurs, and that kind of thing. But there were also women in BOF, that is Biafran Organization of Freedom Fighters. There were women there. There were also women in the militia. There were women farmers. Women played all kinds of roles, cooking for soldiers, preparing food for them. I worked in an officer's mess during the war. We were cooking food for officers. So women played different kinds of roles, and this narratives about this should come up and be distributed so that this kind of proverb should not be given the kind of attention it's given. Thank you. In her novel, Destination Biafra, Buchi Emecheta portrayed Debbie Ogedengbe as a soldier and a commissioned officer. But she was not seen as a military, in military action. Debbie didn't fight a war, but she went around trying to negotiate peace between Biafra and Nigeria during the war. My research revealed that some women, though few, actually participated fighting battles during the war, as I just explained to you. And I've just mentioned this Adeline Opala. And during the war, incidentally, she was known in the military as Staff Darling. That's what they called her, Staff Darling. So any of you who want to ask around may find out more, more research about this woman. After the war, this lady got married and had children, as I said. She's alive today, and she's married. Her husband is called Umasiebu, Chief Umasiebu. Now, there's also another researcher from my town known as Obia Baka, who has done research in the life of this woman. And he wrote a book called History of Oga. I'm from Oga in Anambra State. The title of his book is History of Oga. And he only has a short paragraph for this woman in that History of Oga. And this is what he said about her. Special recognition must be made of a woman warrior, Staff Sergeant Darling, who commanded a platoon of soldiers at the most terrible war axis or sector. She was popularly called Staff Darling, while her actual name is Adeline. I don't want to repeat all this. She got married later in life after the war. But today, nobody is talking about her. She must just be a housewife, languishing, so maybe a housewife taking care of her husband and her children. If she were a man, she would either have written her own account or commissioned people to write her biography, as many of our big men are doing. They commission people, pay millions of naira for people to write their biography. Or she could have written her own autobiography. This is what we are saying. Women should be up and doing. They should reclaim their voice and they should promote themselves. That is part of what we are saying in this lecture. Now, it is interesting to mention here the narratives about other remarkable historical events that celebrate Igbo women's contribution to their communities during a war or crisis. Now, I'm not just limiting myself to Nigerian Biafran War. I'm also talking about other historical moments in the life of Igbo land or Nigeria where women have exhibited courage, intelligence, and forthrightness. Some of you may have heard of Aba Women's War, which some people call Aba Women's Riot. But a lot of historians refer to it as Aba Women War. Now, what happened at that time? It was in 1929, when a large group of women rose en masse and demonstrated, they went on rampage to demonstrate against the British colonial government that wanted to tax women. These women were also joined by some women from the present Akwa Ibom state. And for 3 years, from 1929 to 1931, these women were everywhere, abandoned their trades, their farms, their families, to claim their rights, to fight for their rights. Now, such narratives need to be talked about, written about, And it can be done by anybody, either by men or by women, historians or writers. Do we have a novel based on Aba Women Riot? There should be novels written about such events to memorialize women and their acts. Now, also in my novel, my first novel, The Last of the Strong Ones, which celebrates the war the British administration fought against my people, Oga people, around the late 19th century, that is 1800 and something, to early 20th century. Now, during that war, women played major roles in that war too. And they were among the council of elders, women who were called Oluada, who were representatives of women unions. They also participated during that war. So what I'm saying, the point I'm making is that there is no end to what women have done or are doing to promote Igbo land or Nigeria as a whole, to safeguard themselves and their families, to help in developing their communities. So these things should be documented, either in documentaries or films, or written in books, so that our young ones, like these ones here, who are growing up, will know more about their history, the history of their communities and what happened, and also know what women did. And this will raise their impression. They'll have respect for women. The work done by some scholars, especially women anthropologists and historians, mostly in the second half of the 20th century, have gone a long way to document the activities and roles women played in pre-colonial and colonial periods in Igbo land. In these well-researched papers and books, the scholars try to show that Igbo women were able to take charge of their affairs in socio-political and economic issues and fairly maintained a measure of independence from their men, as well as occasionally resisting any tyrannical acts meted on them, to them by the patriarchal society in which they found themselves. Now, there was a British anthropologist that wrote about Igbo women in the early 20th century. I just want to quote what she said, because she moved around Igbo communities and discovered the kind of abilities women in these communities have. And this is what she said about them in her book. The title of her book is African Women. I'm going to quote her. Her name is Sylvia Leith Ross. That's the name of the woman. You can Google her name. And she wrote in her book, she said, Igbo women were I quote her, a rare and invaluable force. Thousands upon thousands of ambitious, go-ahead, courageous, self-reliant, hard-working, independent women. And she also talked about their startling energy, their power of organization and leadership. So history knows that, history has documented that women have played major role. The only thing is that how the circulation of these texts is not wide. So a lot of people don't know these things. And that is part of what we are trying to do in this lecture, to bring it to the awareness of our people, men and women, the youths, the old people, to know that women have always played a major role in developing our communities. one of the problems responsible for the marginalization of women in the narratives of Biafran War and other narratives is that the oral account of women who witnessed the war have either not been documented or widely circulated, even when they are documented. Besides, women writers' counter-narratives have not attracted an impressive number of readers, except perhaps Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Adichie, which became a global bestseller after it was published in 2006 and won the Orange Prize for Women's Writing in the United Kingdom and has also been made into a film. Other narratives, such as Buchi Emecheta's Destination Biafra and Flora Nwapa's Never Again, have not really been read by many people. How many of you here have read Destination Biafra? Is there anybody here who has read Destination Biafra? You see, nobody. How many of you have read Never Again by Flora Nwapa? Oh, you have, yes? How many of you have read my novel, Roses and Bullets? One person. You see, most writings, most books written by women don't really attract wide circulation or readership as books written by men. But this is part of the limitation women have, that their work, their voices are not heard. So these books are yet to be. Yeah, I have a very limited time now. So I want to, So Buchi Emecheta's vision of war in her book, Destination Biafra, is directed towards exploring the new role women could play in the survival of a nation and in reconciling war-torn communities. From the courage, resilience, and resourcefulness exhibited by many of the women in the novel, particularly Debbie, the protagonist, Emecheta counters the wrong notion regarding women's frivolity, moral debasement, and dependency on men during the war. Her narrative tells us that women were not dependent on men. They were playing active roles. I have to hurry now. It is important to point out that at least 2 courageous women have published their war experiences. This time, you know, most of the non-fiction or factual accounts on the war were written by men. But incidentally, 2 Igbo women published their own factual account of the war. But I'm sure you haven't heard of those books or read them. One of them is a woman called Rose Njoko. She was the wife, or I think she's still alive. She's the wife of General Njoko, who was one of the top military in the Biafran army after Ojukwu. I think he was next, after Madiebo. The wife, Rose Njoko, because she moved with military people, she was able to write her own account of what she observed during the war and the military action too. Another woman who wrote about the war is a woman called Leslie Ofebu. And her book is entitled Blow the Fire. And in this account, she also narrated her experience of the Nigeria-Biafra War. So there are women who have written books about the war, but who is reading them? Who has read them? Now, I have mentioned these 2 books. None of you here has read them. The one is Memoirs of a Housewife. The other one is Blow the Fire. Nobody here has read those books. I read them because I'm a researcher. But nobody here has read them. So this is what we are talking about. We should widen our reading. Let us not just limit ourselves. to reading only very well-known writers. Let us read as much as we can. Now, there's also another woman, Vivian Ogbonna, who has been researching and documenting stories of eyewitnesses during the Nigeria-Biafra War. I know she came to Abakaliki to interview me. And she interviewed many other people, educated and uneducated people, who witnessed the war. And she uploaded her, what she collected, the material she collected online. And she calls it, you can find it in www.mybiafrastory.com. You will see what her own narrative, her own documentation of oral narratives from women and men who witnessed the war. Please note that everything doesn't have to come from books. Even oral narratives are important. Spreading the word is important as we circulate ideas about our culture and our communities. Now, I want to read my conclusion because there's no more time left now. So I conclude, I said, it is somewhat revealing that a war that ended 50 years ago, the Biafran War, has remained in the consciousness of millions of Ndigbo inside and outside Nigeria. Yet, little has been done to document the contribution women made and the roles they played in the war as combatants, special constables, Biafran Organization of Freedom Fighters, militia, farmers, and caregivers. Remember, women also played roles as nurses. They were also members of the Red Cross. Most members of the Red Cross were women. A very good friend of mine and my classmate was killed at the battlefront when she went to treat some wounded soldiers. She was killed there. Wasn't she? That was the kind of sacrifice she made. She lost her life. It is important to say that this lecture could not have come at a better time than now, when issues relating to the rights of women, gender equity, and the virtues of inclusion are in the front burner worldwide. Women everywhere have raised their voices against all forms of marginalization and other subjugating structures society has orchestrated against them, including sexism, misogyny, violence, rape, abduction, battery, and exclusion. Women want to reclaim their voices and make them heard as they struggle to counter all forces militating against their self-actualization. Ashley Judd, the American actor and United Nations Goodwill Ambassador, traveled all over the world speaking to women and reclaiming their rights. In a BBC interview on 20th February 2018, she made some powerful statements about celebrities in the West confronting and shaming their oppressors by speaking out about their experiences of sexual harassment, intimidation, and other subjugating issues. She concluded by saying, I quote her, "It is a great time to be alive, and it is a great time to be a woman," unquote. Today's Nkata Omwibe has provided a platform for all of us here to discuss the issues relating to women and the Biafran War from the women's perspective. We have seen the great contributions women made during the conflict and even during other conflicts. The lecture, or this talk, has highlighted some fictional and factual narratives and counter-narratives that adorn the narratives, the literature generated by the war and its aftermath. It has also affirmed the contribution of women writers, researchers, combatants, and eyewitnesses who have used their written and oral accounts to counter the male writers' subjugative perceptions of the war and their limited interpretations of the events of the war. Daluno, thank you for listening.
I think that round of applause was for me. So let's give our distinguished speaker hers, please. Keep clapping until I say you should stop. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That was such a beautiful presentation. Prof, thank you so much. So one beautiful thing about Nkata Umuibe is that Nkata brings out, hidden perspectives, right? Some places, some thought processes that you never think about when you come here and listen to our speakers, they begin to, come to the fore and you begin to resonate with them. And this topic, this presentation, from this presentation, I was like, how come I've never thought of this in this manner? How come I've never seen it in this light? That when we talk about the war, consciously or unconsciously, we, sideline women, or we just relegate their own efforts to the background. So at the back of this stage is our exhibition titled Ozemena, and it's about the Nigeria-Biafra War. And to my right of the exhibition, you would see pictures that depict the contribution of women during the Nigeria-Biafra War. So, Prof, we are not guilty at TFM. We are giving the story, we are giving a balanced story. All right, so thank you so much once again, Prof, for that lecture, for that presentation. But just like Ndi Igbo na-ekwu, no na anwụ na ngwọ, na nkwụ na-abịa. Okay, so the myth of Nkata Umuibe doesn't start and end at the presentation. But for me, I think it's in the moderated conversation, and that's what we are going into in a bit. So, but before then, please permit me to introduce our moderator for today. And our moderator for today is none other than Mr. James Eze, a Nigerian poet, a journalist, a singer, a speechwriter, a songwriter, and a PR specialist. known for his works, his literary works, including the poetry collection Dispossessed, which won the ANA Poetry Prize in 2020, and also longlisted for the Nigerian Prize for Literature in 2022, and Goosebumps, that was the one I moderated here in 2023, which also garnered critical acclaim in literary circles and when it was actually published. Mr. James says he has a successful career that cuts across journalism, banking, telecoms, public service, and was at different times the head of external communications at Fidelity Bank, head of marketing at Main Street Bank, head of public relations at Airtel Nigeria, and former chief press secretary and speechwriter to the governor of Anambra State. Currently, Mr. James is the CEO of Udala Tree Consult Nigeria, a public relations consulting firm, based in Enugu, Nigeria. Let's put our hands together for Mr. James Eze. Please keep clapping until he gets to his seat. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. We are gathered once again, as is the tradition of the Center for Memories, to raise some level of awakening amongst our people on the things that are very important to us as a people, but things that if we are not reminded of, we are very likely to forget. I would like to, without much ado, commend the Center for Memories for the role that it has continued to play in contemporary Nigeria as the conscience of Ndi Igbo, pointing the Igbo society to, things that should matter to us. I recall that, in the past few months, the center has, been focused on issues that are related to women. So that consciousness is not lost on us. It should not be lost on us. Just the other day, we gathered here to discuss Nwanyi Buife, and it was such an enlightening session. And today again, we have gathered to look at what has been an obvious fallacy that nwoke n'osi ọgụ nwanyị enwela akụkọ. Ndị be anyị unu afugonu na ọ bụrụ eziokwu, at least from Professor Ezigbo's presentation, we can now, most of us who are here and the people who are participating in this engagement online, we at least have a better handle on the story, at least a balance of story. You know, that ọbụrụ mgbe niile ka ọ bụ sọ nwoke na-anụ ọgụ na nwaanyị na onwe na-anụkwa ọgụ nụ karịa nwoke in some instances. And for me, the thing to take away from this presentation is the fact that what we have hitherto known as Aba women's riots is actually a war. So, but because of the tendency to put down everything basalo mwani, you know, we euphemistically swept it away as a mere riot. But it was a war. Prof, I would like to thank you for, this is a new one, sincerely, to me, you know, and a better perspective on what happened. Not that even if they had called it a riot, we would have completely diminished it, because I can imagine the level of courage it must have taken those women to rise when the men folk had lost their manhood, so to speak. So I think it's on that note that I would like to finally go into this conversation, Prof, if you permit me. All right. Thank you very much. I could almost, what I deduced from this lecture, very brilliant and succinct and direct and enlightening, is that, you know, sadly, even the saying that nwoke n'osi ọgụ nwanyị enwela akụkọ seems to be an injustice of sorts, because from the look of things, anyị ekwekwuru ụmụ nwanyị nweluzi akụkọ nwa. You know, we have even stripped the women of the right to the narrative, so to speak. You said that about 50 Nigerian, out of 50 or so stories, you know, out of the Civil War, that women contributed only about 12 or less. So it would seem to me that we haven't even allowed women to assume that responsibility that, you know, that saying appears to have allotted to you. I would like to know what you think about, you know, this obvious, should I call it injustice? And how, being a woman, I regret to say I'm not one. I wonder how it feels to be a woman evolving from the traditional society, which you had observed that even in the traditional Igbo society, how many women were allowed to participate in the village democracy, in the decision-making process? So how does it really feel, you know, personally to you, a woman of immense sensibilities like yourself, how does it feel to realize that being a woman in Nigeria is like a race against the wind? Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, for your question. Well, I want to begin by acknowledging my younger sister. Please, can you stand up? This is Professor Chinyere Stella Okonna, one of the most renowned women achievers in Nigeria today. Professor Chinyere Stella Okonna. She's my immediate younger sister. Let me tell you why I introduced her. The question he asked me, the family you come from matters a lot. You can imagine my age. But I grew up in a family that empowered women. My father was educated, and he wanted we are 4 women and 2 men. And 2 of us came first before the boys came. 2 women, I first, she followed me, 2 boys, and then 2 girls. 6 of us. And my father started with us, the elders. And he gave us the best education you can have in this country. She had her university education with federal government scholarship, and I did too. I was, because after the war, there was no, but 2 of us got scholarships immediately after the war. Federal government scholarship. That gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. We were empowered right from childhood. We were given good education, quality education by our parents. So we were never made to feel that we were women. In fact, my father told me when I was in secondary school, you will go to university, my daughter, my first daughter. He told me that. How many, I remember after the war, we were in secondary school when the war started. But after the war, he sent us back to school. But many of my classmates did not continue. They married or they lost it along the way. So the family one comes from is very important in empowering women, making you feel that you are not important, that you matter. So this is what we are telling to parents today. Please educate your daughters. You don't even know who will promote you or bless you later as a parent. It could be your daughter. There's a girl I know who is in the US today. Her father is lying critically ill at St. Nicholas Hospital, Lagos. It is this girl from Canada who is sending millions of naira. One test alone is 1 million naira something. Then being in intensive unit for just a week, 2 weeks, 8 million naira. How many people in Nigeria can afford that kind of money now? But you know, when they bring back a few dollars from abroad, it turns into a lot of money in Nigeria. So what I'm saying is, we did not feel that we are less than human as we are growing up as daughters. My sister can attest to that. But our culture is structured in such a way that women don't have much chance. I remember after the war, when my father sent 2 of us back to school, his brothers were saying, why are you sending them? Let them marry. That's what they were telling my father. You know, some of his relations, they were saying, let these girls marry. Are they going back to school? Because they were of marriageable age at that time. So what I'm saying is the society. The society is to blame. But families, parents are also to blame. If you don't educate your daughters, if you don't empower them, if you don't make them confident in themselves from when they are young, you are not doing well. So society is to blame, and communities and parents are to blame. And let me tell you, what I'm saying does not mean that when you are an empowered woman, you will begin to override men or tell men, be aggressive. No. My sister is happily married, and I am also happily married. Her husband is a medical doctor with his own hospital. My husband is a professor of surveying engineering. So, and we work with our husbands. We see them as heads of families. So I'm not saying this, that girls should be wild and start challenging men. The important thing is for men and women to work together to develop the family, to develop the community. None should disregard the other. That's what we're saying. We're not saying that women should now be on top of men. No. That's not what we're saying. But what we are saying is including women in activities, in decision makings, in policy making, in government, in community affairs. Maybe I sit up here.
I really wish you had gone a little further, because I'm sure we are all learning, and that's the essence of this moderated session, so that people could actually come up close and hear some personal stories and anecdotes. And the story of you and your lovely sister is an inspiration, to all of us. I recall when I was in the university, I had heard her name consistently because I studied mass communication, and she's the pioneer female professor of mass communication in Nigeria. Oh, goodness me. So you can see. I never really knew back then that, anything would, bring us together. That I would even get to see her in person. So that's why we're having this session. Now, Prof, as a writer of note, your genius transcends all the genres. And you have pointed out that some, male authors, in Nigeria who have written about the Civil War, who have written about other stories concerning the Nigerian condition, have had the tendency to, create dysfunctional female characters. So, and I am wondering, would you say that the female writers have actually tried to balance this story? Thank you.
Yeah, I think to a great extent, yes. If you look at some of the female authors' books I mentioned, like Destination Biafra, the main character is an army officer, a woman, Debbie. That is Buchie Mecheta's novel, Destination Biafra. Debbie is a military officer, a commissioned army officer. And then if you look at Flora Nwapa's Never Again, her major character there is also an educated woman and her war. And if you look at my novel, Roses and Bullets, you can also see women who are given agency and contribute to the war and also have their terrible experiences. The same thing with Chimamanda Adichie's Half of a Yellow Sun. If you read it, Olanna and her sister, her younger sister, were very active in that novel. They were given agency. Olanna was active, and then her younger sister was running a refugee camp, supplying relief to displaced people. And at a stage in the war, she went on attack trade to bring goods, commodities. She never came back. I think she died along the way. So women writers have tried to redress some of these anomalies and gaps here and there in the male narrative.
But Prof, looking at the Nigerian literary scene, it seems to me actually that there has been some measure of justice. Apart from the pioneering set, the Achebe generation, and maybe the generation after that, I think that Nigeria has produced, to my mind, more female writers of note in recent times than even the male writers. And I am wondering, because in your lecture, you submitted that even the female writers who write nowadays are not really as widely read as maybe the generations before them. Do you really think that there is something that can be done to create more audiences for, the women writers, especially those of the current generation? Is there something you are thinking, like some kind of action, maybe, I wouldn't call it affirmative action, but a conscious effort to draw attention to an imbalance that had existed for some time and needs to be corrected?
Well, look at my paper closely, you will notice that it's, I was discussing things that happened at a particular stage in our lives. You are right. Today, we have so many powerful women writers here in Nigeria and in the diaspora. We are talking of Chimamanda Adichie, we are talking about Chika Onigwe, Lola, Adebayo, the one who wrote, her book was shortlisted for Booker Prize. There are quite a number of women who are doing very well. Nnedi Okorafor, who writes futuristic literature. There are many of them. So the present generation, we often refer to them as the third and fourth generation of Nigerian writers. There are many women who are doing very well among them. But I was talking about what happened in the past. So now, but the issue is still, the question is still, how many people are reading these writers? We want to encourage our young people to read. And you don't even, it's not all about books. Many of these books are also on Amazon, on internet. They're online, digital books. So even if you don't read physical books, you can download books and read e-books. You have opportunities that people of our age didn't have when we were your age. When I was your age, there was no internet. There was no phone for me to, I can Google anything, any information I want today. Information is at your fingertips. So women writers are doing very well. They are doing very well, and I'm sure you've heard about some of them. And but the younger ones who are coming up, we want you to continue where they are now. You continue growing. If you have a talent, you should develop it. You can attend creative writing workshops. You can read. There's nothing that helps a writer as reading. If you are a reader, you don't even need a creative writing class. By imbibing what others write, you are not copying them or emulating them. You can start writing your own. So reading is very, very, very important. Opening yourself up to reading during the holiday. And some of you may eventually end up becoming either scientists, doctors, or engineers. But let me tell you that some of the best novelists in the world today are medical doctors. They are lawyers. They are engineers. So you don't even have to read literature or arts to be a good writer. In any profession you are, one of the top writers we have in Nigeria today is a medical doctor, Wale Okediro. And some are lawyers. Some are engineers. This guy from Obinna, from Ebonyi State, he's an engineer, electrical engineer or something like that. He's an engineer, and he's written very powerful novels. So any profession you eventually follow, you can write by the side, or at least you can read. You don't have to say, I'm not in the arts, why should I read? Because reading also, there's nothing like, reading empowers you, it improves your vocabulary, gives you, you can speak better if you read. You can speak more grammatically if you read, because by reading, you get to know the nuances of the language you are reading in, whether it's Igbo or English or French. By reading, you get to know the language better and use it better. So let us expand our reading. Reading will also help you if you are studying engineering, if you read wide, it will help you to do better in engineering or whichever profession in which you find yourself. So there are avenues through which young people can empower themselves. And I think that there are also literary bodies like Association of Nigerian Authors and some others like that are empowering young people, inviting them, creating workshops for them. So you can become members of such associations too, to empower yourself, especially if you have the talent to write.
Okay, Prof, this will probably be the final question before we open the microphone for the audience. And now, looking at the Biafran War and the narratives that the war has sired, it would seem that, we have the war, even though it has churned out so many, works of fiction and even poetry, we don't seem to have seen some very great female characters out of these narratives, dominate the imagination of the reading public. Would you like to, task this generation and the generations to come? Because I remember that one of my favorite works is, War and Peace. War and Peace by, what's the name of that Russian author again? Why should I forget his name? Okay, but I read it. I think it's Tolstoy. War and Peace by Tolstoy, and a great piece of literature. My interest in it was actually sparked by what I learned from Ben Obumselo, that Christopher Kibo, after reading War and Peace and some other, classic war literature, became about taking part in the Biafran War and, experiencing the war. So he would also write a book. So that tells you about how important war literatures are. Would you recommend, or rather set it as a task for this generation for, women writers, especially now that we have, quite a lot of them writing, to try to change the narrative, and we reposition this perception na akoko belongs to Wani, while the actual combat and the heroism that comes with it belong to Moke. Is this something, is that a narrative we want to change by setting the agenda for this generation? Thank you.
Well, this lecture is at the beginning, or at least one of it may have started because the Center for Memory is doing a great job promoting women and trying to include them in things. So that is already going on. This lecture can also help in helping the youth to understand this business of inclusion, the importance of it. Now, you were talking about how many of the characters resonate or they are known. But you know that even in Nigeria today, how many, even our successful writers, how many of them, apart from, say, Chinua Achebe, Okonkwo, once you mention Okonkwo, everybody knows who we are talking about. Or maybe you mention Soyinka's brother Jero, something like that. But there are many writers, they are doing well, but you may not even remember the characters that are prominent in the work. It's even worse in the case of women, because many haven't read them. It's when you read a book that you will remember the memorable characters in that book. If you haven't read the book, you will not remember. For instance, I know a lot of my friends and people that meet me, they call me Ego Woman. Why? Because the major character or major characters in my trilogy is a woman known as Ugowan, Ego Woman. So some people call me Ego Woman, the original Ego Woman, something like that. It's because they have read those books. If they hadn't read them, how would they know that there's a woman novel that is called Ego Woman? And I bet you that even many of you sitting in this room haven't even read that novel, Ego Woman, which is being made into a film now. So this is the issue I'm talking about, this poor readership we have among many of our young people, and even the older generation. Many people don't read. Even our leaders, do they read? I was amazed when I read the biography of readers like Churchill, one of the earlier, Winston Churchill of Britain, Prime Minister in the UK. And then I read the biography of Obama, the first black American president. And then I read about Ben Carson. Have you heard of Ben Carson? A famous medical guru, a doctor. I read their biographies. And one of the things they point out is how they read. They were great readers. They said, readers are leaders. Have you heard that expression? Readers are leaders. So these great people, they read, so they got to know. For instance, when you mention Hamlet, everybody knows you are talking about Shakespeare, because people have read that play. Or Macbeth. How many people, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Macbeth, because you have read that play called Macbeth. So it's only by exercising that reading ability, habit, that you can imbibe some of these ideas and get to know them. I was also surprised when I read, and Ben Carson said when he was growing up, because he's a black American, if you remember. His family was very poor. The mother was just a cleaner. There were no books for them in the family. So he would pick up old torn books dropped by white people. He started reading like that. But see where he is today. So let us try to empower ourselves as much as we can, to empower others around us by equipping them, giving them the correct equipment to help them to rise in life. This is what we should all be doing. It's all an aspect of mentorship. Let us mentor people. And young people, you mentor those who are younger than you. If you are a secondary school or a university student, mentor those in primary school, in your family, or even others. If you buy storybooks for children, give them out to poor children around your community or your village. This is a way of empowering them.
Excellent. Well, I think at this stage, we have some contributions from the virtual audience. I think I'll have to read. The first question from Zoom came from Miracle Okam. And Miracle says, do you think that the general attitude of the Nigerian government stifling the stories of the Biafran accounts for the loss of women's voices, or is it largely a cultural issue? That is the general attitude of the Nigerian government stifling the stories of the Biafran account, and then is it accountable? Is that the reason why women's voices seem to have thinned out, or is it largely a cultural issue?
Well, it could be part of it, but it's only a minor contributor. Because if you look at it, even though the history of Nigerian civil war is not being taught in school, which is a pity. Because if you look at the American Civil War, they were teaching it in school for the people to know what caused that war and avoid those things that caused the war. Most wars, the countries will teach the wars about the war so that people will learn from them. But I don't think Nigerian Civil War, the story of it, is being taught anywhere in Nigeria. But what about, even if you are not taught about this war in the classroom, what about these books that are written about the war? Is the government stopping you from reading them?
No.
So you can buy the books yourself. You don't have to wait for government. Is the government going to sanction to say, okay, read this book? So that's one way you can have access to the story about the war. And you can also get the narrative even from your relations. I saw in Adiche's half of a lesson, she said she learned about the story, she learned the narrative of the war from her grandfather, grandmother, and her relations, her parents. They told her about the war. And then she reconstructed it and wrote her own novel. Adichie was not born during the war or before the war. She was born after the war. And yet she wrote so brilliantly about it. Because she was interested in knowing, in gathering stories, oral narratives, gathered all this and fictionalized them, transmuted them into fiction. A very powerful one for that matter. So it's, culture may also be part of it, but these are really indices that should not restrict you from knowing what you want to know. There are books out there that can teach you about the Civil War. There are still thousands of Nigerians who were alive during that war, whom you can ask to tell you the story of what happened if you were born after the war.
Okay, then there is also an addition to the first question. He says, I always argue that the loss of women's power and voices is a product of colonialism, and this is also reflected in this lack of women's role in war. What do you think?
That is quite true. Colonialism is part of it. Because before the colonial powers came to Africa, women had a measure of independence and a say. But when they came, men were given education first, and so they were given authority. Many women did not have education in the colonial period. Even when they had education, they were trained as teachers or nurses, which didn't really empower them. it was men that went to the university and did medicine or learned all those subjects. So that is why the men were very much ahead of women. Very few families send their daughters to school during the colonial. They prefer to send the boys, their sons. And sometimes they did not send their first son because they want him to keep the family tradition intact. So these are I agree with the person who asked this question that colonialism was part of it. But colonialism ended many years ago, so we don't have to still be complaining about colonialism. We can empower ourselves today.
Yeah, I was, on my own, I was also wondering whether the seeming silence on the need to tell about women's war in a narrative fiction form or thereabout is also part of, is as a result of, because I'm not sure that any Nigerian author, whether male or female, has written anything of note, that are sought to either fictionize that story or put it in a better perspective or in a more preservable form for generations to come. Do you think that it's also, that this is as a result of the usual negligence of issues concerning women? In any case, if the war had been led by men, would it have been given better attention than it presently receives? No, I'm talking about the Aba Women's War. I'm saying because it seems that story, important as it is, has not really been told in multiple forms as one would have expected, because it represents a rupture in our history. And one wonders, is it also part of those things we do to our women, neglecting an important story, a landmark story as the Aba Women's War?
I think that is part of it, because maybe men did not write about it and women did not. So, and as I said, men, especially before. Now, women writers are coming on now, but before, most of the writers were women. I remember, like in the 90s, when I was a member of Nigerian Association of Nigerian Authors, we were very few women who were members. Most of the members were men. And in those days, people who submitted their works for prizes, they were mostly men. So that is a part of it. And now that many women are reclaiming their voices and they're writing about their own experiences, their community experiences, and societal experiences. So things are changing gradually.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we should give Prof a big round of applause for this session of the exchanges, because it involves just the two of us. Now we are opening the microphone for the audience to get to shoot at her. So kindly just introduce yourself, tell us your name, and if it is possible, what you do for a living, so that people will know you, and then you ask your question. Be just direct to the point. Direct to the point, no storytelling. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Prof. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be very, very brief. When I got this invite for this month's discussion, and I saw the topic, I told them that I'm in love with this topic, because it's an area that most people have not touched on. But I believe that the Center for Memory's duty is to remind us of the past and prepare us for the future. So my own is not a question, it's just to make a brief contribution. I want to speak in the area of going forward. In many places, let me start with the population of Nigeria. The last census was in 2006. Is that we've not had any census. But currently, it is predicted that Nigeria is about 220 million. And out of 220 million people, we have 112 million women. Only women. Girl, child, not included. Which is to say that women have the power, the energy, and everything to take over. But I want to disagree a bit with what Prof said. Because in most fora that I've attended, most meetings or symposiums that I've attended, when such issue comes up, you see women crying victims. But I want to open this, expose women to this very hard and difficult truth. It is very hard to accept and to believe that the problem of a Nigerian woman and Nigerian women, whether you like it or not, I'm a journalist and I'm an author too. I have traveled at least 30 states of Nigeria and I have seen different backgrounds. If you want to practice what I just told you, August is just coming. Just take a visit to all these August meetings women do here and there. You will find out that women don't agree with women. And that's the problem. When you see men gather, 2, 3 men, they must fight together, disagree, but at the end, they agree. But women disagree to disagree.
Okay.
Take an example of what just happened, just to conclude. Take an example of what happened at the National Assembly. The person that revealed the secret of Natasha was a woman. The person that led a protest to recall her was a woman. And the woman was in part of the committee that wanted to recall her.
All right.
What happened to the men? Men were just sitting in the background. So if women actually want to dominate, they can. And if there is opportunity for them to start having meetings, how they can do this. The election is coming up, everything is happening, but I don't see women leading from the front. They're always behind.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very, no matter what we think of it, a very brilliant submission because it offers the other viewpoint as the case. Okay, Prof, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really, I didn't come here. I came to listen to my sister speak. But what the last speaker said now has, motivated me to say something. You know, each time I speak to women, particularly young women, I try to tell them not to listen to those who say that women are their own greatest enemies. It is not true. That's what they say to divide women and weaken their resolve to forge ahead. You know, men fight more than women do, don't they? When women fight, sometimes we exchange words, we could fight physically. The men fight so viciously, they kill themselves while fighting. So, yeah. Women fight themselves. Whether they resolve the fight at the end is another matter. But men also fight and fight more viciously. So don't let anybody deceive you. Particularly young women. Don't let anybody tell you that women are their own greatest enemy. It is not true. I don't believe that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very beautiful one. You know, the two viewpoints are actually very relevant to our conversation because there is a possibility that there are some people who believe that women are their own worst enemies. You know, now such people have heard the counter viewpoint that men are even their what? Well, Deacon Abalizu, do we take one more question or do we? Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think, the day is almost well spent and we have listened to Professor Ezigbo and listened to contributions from the audience and what a memorable day it has been for me. I hope the experience is mutual, that you people feel the same way. The only thing I ask of you is that it would be a grave injustice if we leave this hall without giving Professor Akachi Ezigbo a standing ovation. Bikon, kaikulot okeneya. Dallon. All right, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mr. James. Thank you so much, Prof, for the conversation which you started this evening, and for Mr. James driving this conversation seamlessly, and for the members of the audience for your contribution and your rapt attention towards everything that Prof has shared this evening. And, okay, Chukwudi, I'm standing brief for you, so. So I'll hand over to Chukwudi to continue. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Director, for standing for me. And thank you so much to our audience for being with us so far. At this point, it's our culture here that after every presentation by this distinguished speaker and then the moderator session, we offer a little token of appreciation to the speaker and the moderator, and to perform this very honorable task, I'll call on Mr. Emeka Amba, CEO of Afia TV, to come up and do the presentation. Please keep clapping. It's coming from behind. Don't worry, Honorable. Just keep clapping.
I think on behalf of the organizers, especially the board and management of this this center, it gives me great pleasure to present this to you for a great job in moderating the session. Very well done. Thank you so much. Prof, when you were speaking, and of course, thank you for introducing your sister. All of us that studied mass communication, we owe her a lot. Thank you. It's good to meet you in person. It's brilliant listening to you, and I think James did a fantastic job in moderation. I just want to quip one small thing. I think that in this age and time when we are living in an attention economy, even the act of telling the story, especially in this age, telling stories is even a greater form of warfare. And I think that we cannot leave this world and even dream of a bigger, better future without women. Because it's like walking around with, 50% of your body not intact. So I want to thank you for doing a fantastic job. Certainly look forward to listening and following more and more of what you've done. Dalu. So on behalf of the board and the management and all of us who are here, it gives me great pleasure to be asked to present this to you. Dalu. Congratulations, man. But thank you all. As always, every time we come to Center for Memories, I think for all of us who have made this a regular habit of coming here, we all now understand every time, every session like this, we understand the importance of this platform, of this institution, not only to strengthening especially for young people, the imagination of who we are as a people, but learning from people who have, decades of experience, as we've listened to Prof today. It's just a magnificent, and I hope one day you guys will admit me to your board, because it's such a distinguished institution, and I can't tell you guys how important it is. So on their behalf, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Again, apologies for the late start, but I really want to thank you all for coming. There are a few people that I've been asked to say thank you to, especially Enugu Sports Club for their continued support, Urban Radio for the media partnership, the place that I work part-time, Afia TV, for continuing to support, Nzapu. Voice of the East. Excellent, yes. And of course, Ford Foundation, As I was wondering, they are the people making sure that the lights are on in this place. So I want to, on behalf of everyone, thank Ford Foundation for continuing to support this great initiative. So thank you all, and see you next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mekamba, for doing such a fantastic job. And with that, we have come to the end of Nkatumibe for May 2025. And as usual, please, let's come forward for the group photograph. Please do not leave, just come forward for the group photograph, after which you can network as long as you like and, take a look at our artifacts hanging around the walls. Thank you so much for coming once again.
Ndị be anyị ka nwere